We here at WKAR exist to serve Mid-Michigan with trusted journalism and local programming. Federal funding has been eliminated, which means community support is critical to sustaining this service and helping WKAR meet evolving community needs. Your ongoing support ensures public media remains freely available and locally focused. Become a sustaining member or upgrade your current gift today. Sustain what matters. Build what's next.
Thanks for tuning in to OTR this week. Democratic Representative Alabas Farhat, who's a member of the House Appropriations Committee, is here to talk about budgets and other stuff. Sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. Like to say welcome to you to Off the Record. We had a kind of a crazy news week. We have a doctor story. Long story short, the state of Michigan was in an agreement to have outside docs come in. This was at risk.
Well, right. And I think what this story is a bigger story of what we've seen this year, which is not much happening, and then waiting to the very last minute and finally looking like there's going to be passage. I mean, the House passed the bill. The House is going on 3-week break. We'll talk to the guest about that. The Senate's back next week before their 2-week break. The Senate has agreed to take it up on Tuesday. So it looks like now there's going to be this bipartisan agreement. But really what was at stake here was, like you talked about, this interstate compact agreement, licensure agreement. And what was happening was it had passed the House, it had passed the Senate, and there were issues about who was going to get credit on the bill.
Why do the people at home care about this?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Because I think it's
Zoe,
actually, well, I was trying to give other people, a moment to.
Hear your answer.
Why do people at home care about it?
We're hanging on your every word.
Like I said, I think it is a bigger story right now of when I asked the representative this morning, what's happening in the House, he said, nothing. Right? And so this is actually something happening, but much like minimum wage last year, it was waiting to the very last deadline. I mean, the deadline on this was March 20.
Kyle, why is this important to the viewers at home?
It shows just gridlock in Lansing is what it shows like.
The story is we're keeping doctors in the state to keep people healthy.
So that's the short-term question.
Policy, Tim.
I'm sorry. Margaret, help me out.
You got a few thousand doctors at least who are from somewhere other than Michigan that are practicing in Michigan, and their licensing was at risk if they don't do anything by March 28th. That's what you're getting at, I'm guessing. But yes, the bigger story, which is just as important, if not more important, is that the legislature is not getting anything done unless there is a drastic timeline, and there are so few laws being passed that they're arguing about whose name is on the law.
Yep.
But isn't it good news that he stood at a news conference, he being the Speaker of the House, and congratulated his counterpart in the Senate, Ms. Brinks, for getting the job done?
It was interesting that there seemed to be...
the quote was, I'm optimistic about the future.
Yeah. Well, look, Matt Hall likes to talk about what a deal maker he is. We know this. There were multiple press conferences, and one of them he did. He said, that he worked directly. It sounds like they even sat down together, Matt Hall and Winnie Brinks, which, if that's the case, that could be the first time in months that the two of them have actually sat down and talked together.
But to this point, though, Tim, this is the type of deal that is typically worked out as just run-of-the-mill, just course of business type of stuff in the state legislature. This particular bill was a no-brainer. There was no way they weren't going to get this thing passed, and under normal circumstances, we would have never been even talking about it.
Well, if that was the case, why didn't they fix it a year ago when they had a chance to do it?
Because what the Speaker has done a great job of doing is using every little piece of legislation that comes through as leverage towards something bigger. And this was one of those cases. This is a crisis type situation that he could use as leverage for something else later. And the leverage in this case was to get Riley Linting, who is in a politically competitive district, a significant public act that she can go back to her district and say, I helped make sure that doctors from out of state are able to come and practice in Michigan and help you Michiganders. And it was because of me.
But at the end of the day, if that's the leverage that they're getting, no voters are going to care about that in November.
No, but it's an inside baseball story.
It's incredibly inside baseball.
He also gave something to Hertel from the Senate, who's in a competitive.
And likewise, no voter is going to be like, I'm voting for Hertel because of this bill that was passed in whatever month it is, March of 2026.
No, to Craig's point, though, this is what I'm fascinated by right now is this tit for tat on whose name gets public act. And now when these elections are so nationalized, right? Like how much does something like this over the summer, particularly if the budget isn't done come summer, going and knocking on doors and saying, look what I did. I mean, how much is that actually going to affect November's election?
Well, if you want a choice or not, you want to have something positive to say rather than nothing.
Sure, especially if there's no budget.
I mean, they need something for their marginal members to run on. And I think that's one of the points that has been lost this year. There have been so few laws passed that these marginal members, they don't have a slew of bills that they worked on. In the past, you'd have a member that was in a vulnerable district that would have 10 laws that they did. And they could go back and talk about, here's the bridge funding I got. Here's a law I got passed. They'd have a list of things that they could talk about.
Ours will go home and say 3 words: waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, but you also got to bring home some bacon too. And this new process, to Craig's point here about how they do appropriations, they've significantly trimmed a lot of that out of the budget. In the last few years, you were able to say, I made sure that we got this bridge, that we got this sewer line done, that we got this new fire station. And a lot of that's been taken away. So you need these kind of incremental victories in order to say that they are actually accomplishing something.
I think it's going to be really interesting when we come back after spring break, when I assume focus is going. I know I keep talking about the budget, but that's the one constitutional thing that has to get done.
Do you remember how long we waited last year for targets? Katie was at the door, and we're unbarring it, okay? And now they've got targets already.
It just shows you it's a campaign year. Last year they were really trying to find as much waste, fraud, and abuse as they could, and they used the clock successfully as leverage to eliminate or to crack down on these legislative earmarks, this pork that Hall has really got a bugaboo about. And this year they've already gone through the budget. They know that they need their vulnerables and their people in marginal districts to be able to run on something. And the budget not done in August just doesn't look good.
So all you guys that sat around this table for the last 6 months and said they're not going to get this done on time.
Look, at the State of the State afterwards, we had Matt Hall on the program, and I asked him multiple times, will you say that the budget is going to get done October 1st? I would say that if you're working on good government and that you want to be able to tell voters, we know what we're doing right now and we've got this handled, I would say I'm going to get the budget done by October 1st.
Well, but if you want to play the game, you don't show your cards.
Which we know that Matt Hall likes to play the game.
So end of story. Are you with me?
Rare.
All right, I'm sorry.
I still want to see if this budget gets done by July 1.
I agree. I mean, the targets should be the easiest part. They're just numbers. Here's some numbers we want to hit for each budget category. The questions are, how do you get there? They got to cut some significant things.
They're going to just raid the rainy day fund. They're going to raid the rainy day fund. And
so you think the House Republicans are going to raid the rainy day fund after saying they're not? Wow.
They didn't. They said they don't want to, and there's a difference. They don't want to. They don't want to. There's a lot of things I don't want to do, but are going to happen anyway. They will raid the rainy day fund. They will get it done by July 1.
It's going to be a lot.
They'll get it done before July 1.
Maybe 500, maybe 500 million, something like that. Something like that. They'll balance it out, and it's to everybody's advantage in that Capitol building. They get this done by July 1. I would be extremely surprised if they don't.
This is going to be so fascinating to watch.
You guys want me to hang on to this tape?
You always say that. Yeah, let's see it.
We can't afford it. Okay. We need a tape. Secretary of State races. We haven't talked about this. Let's do the R's first, quickly.
So the Republican one, we've got Tony Forlini, who's the Macomb County Clerk, who is running for Secretary of
State lawmaker.
Former state lawmaker. We've also got 2 people who are kind of running in the kind of the MAGA route, if you will. We've got Monica Yatuma. She's I think the big name who I think has been extremely aggressive on that front, and Michelle
Amanda Love.
Amanda Love
Yeah.
is who's also running in that vein, and it's been very competitive in the sense that they've had a lot of forums and roundtables, and they're going to decide who's going to be the front runner for the nomination next week on Saturday.
So what decides this race? What's the issue?
The issue is kind of the makeup of the delegates. And is the Republican makeup similar to what we saw 2 years ago when the Republicans delivered Matt DePerno and Christina Caramo, two candidates who had very, very little shot of winning in the general election, but it really showed where the heart of the delegates were. That they wanted, as Kevin Rinke said on the show a few weeks ago, would they rather be right or happy? Do they want to be right with their beliefs that they need election integrity, that 2020 was fixed, or do they want to present somebody that the general public could see as being legitimate and electable?
Yeah, I mean, he's right. It's about the confidence in the election system. There's a huge group of GOP delegates that have no confidence in our current election system. They have sought to undermine it and spread theories about what's going on with how votes are counted. And you have a couple candidates in this race who are doing that and are being supported by some national voices who have been doing that. And then you have Tony Forlini, who's part of the election system in one of the biggest counties in the state, Macomb County, and he's running. And a lot of Republicans view he's the only one of the three that give them a chance in the general election.
Even he tried to play the game.
He's been trying to play the game a little bit.
Did they come up with 4 people that had not?
Let's remember, just for folks at home, like what we're talking about is the convention that is going to basically say, hey, here's who we think should be running, and that these are not primary elections.
Right.
I think it's
the people
really,
at home don't get to play.
Right. You do not get to vote on this. These are the diehards who get to choose.
And on the D side.
I mean, on the D side, it's a fascinating race. It truly is. I mean, you have Ingham County Clerk Barb Byram, who's been a long time an election official. She's the only one of the 3 Democrats running who has experience actually administering elections. She's talking about that a lot. However, there are a lot of concerns among Democrats about a situation involving her son and some assault allegations from when he was in middle school. This is now becoming something at the forefront of this race.
And all of this stuff was dismissed. There are no charges on anything.
The son was not charged. He was suspended from school. There was a lawsuit filed. That was dismissed. You have the lieutenant governor of the state, who a lot of the union groups are getting behind, Garland Gilchrist, to be the Secretary of State. And you have Susan Shkreli, who was the former Lottery Commission. We have a story this morning that Susanna Shkreli told us in an interview yesterday that Garland once told her a few months ago that he had no interest in being Secretary of State. And now he is very likely the front runner in this race.
To which I say, so what?
Well, it raises a point about, how hard is he willing to work on the campaign trail for this race? It raises questions about what he'll do when he gets into office. I mean, they're legitimate questions.
Is his heart really into this? I mean, he really wanted to be governor is what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And so he got out of the governor's race to do this Secretary of State bid. So, the folks at home might be like, well, why? Like, why is everybody getting behind him? A lot of the Democratic ticket, it has to do with balance. The balance is such a huge part for them. Racial balance in particular. And if you're able to go ahead and nominate for Secretary of State Garland Gilchrist, that opens up possibilities for the Democratic gubernatorial nominee, Jocelyn Benson, to pick whoever she wants. And she doesn't have to...
For lieutenant governor.
She doesn't have to pick somebody who happens to be black in order to create that balance on the ticket.
And I think this issue is really important this year specifically because there's a likelihood that the Republicans will have an African-American nominee for governor. And then there's a likelihood that there will be an independent candidate who was the former mayor of Detroit who's going to be heavily contesting this race. So, the black vote in Detroit is going to be key in all of this. If Republicans can shave off some votes because African-American voters in the city are frustrated with what the Democrats are doing, that could be crucial to the outcome.
What you're saying is that the traditional Democratic bounce out of Detroit, which propels into the rest of the state to counteract what happens up north, the bounce may not be too high.
It's a question about what happens in the next few months. I mean, I can't predict right now where it will end, but this Secretary of State race, if Garland somehow doesn't win this, there could be a lot of repercussions, and it could be, regardless of who wins, there could be repercussions.
All right, at this point, let's call in the Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee. Mr. Farhat, please. Thank you.
Oh, I thought you said throw it.
Representative Farhat, it's good to see you. Welcome back. How's everything down in Dearborn?
It's today's actually Eid, so we're wishing everybody a happy Eid Mubarak if they're celebrating it, end of Ramadan. So
Is it the Trump country or a county today or area today that it was during the last election?
When Trump came to Dearborn, he actually came to Dearborn and he wrote a really nice letter telling all the voters there that wanted peace in the Middle East that it's over on day one. We're going to end this war in Ukraine. We're going to end the war in Gaza. And now you're seeing more than ever we're more involved in a kinetic conflict in the Middle East. Ukraine is still a mess with the war going on there. I don't think he'd be welcomed back to Dearborn the way he was in 24. I think a lot of people have seen him kind of fall short on his promises. And I think it's been a shame, really, to see this presidency diminish our global standing as an ally.
Is that a sense based on your hope or reality of what you hear on the ground?
I think it's a reality. I mean, look at, again, America's standing as a global power has been diminished. Our allies aren't supporting us in a conflict in the Middle East. Oil is up $1. Nobody can explain why we're in this conflict clearly, succinctly. You ask the White House 6 times, they'll give you 6 different answers. And I think it's a real issue right now for a lot of voters in America.
But he says he's protecting your people in Dearborn from that atomic bomb.
Ever since I've been alive, Iran has been 6 months away. Every administration that's 6 months away, 6 months away. And if you believe the president, in November, they took out their nuclear capabilities. But here we are, more involved than before. You're hearing $200 billion in money being spent to fight this conflict on Israel's behalf. 2,000 troops, Marines, might be sent into Iran. Congress has not been fully briefed. They haven't voted on this conflict.
Should voters be surprised that these promises that the president made on the campaign trail have not been fulfilled?
I think they should be, yes, because if they're not, that means they're accepting politicians that will come and lie to them. And I don't think we ever should accept anyone that wants to be in a position of public trust to come in and to lie and to fall short on their promises. I think people are tired of hypocrisy. When you see us being told there's no money for health care, for education, for good public schools, for quality roads, but we see $200 billion magically appear to go fight a war that the American people didn't vote for and that Congress never authorized.
But isn't this war, though, more about helping Israel and getting back at those individuals and those terrorists who went into Israel on October 7 and raped and pillaged hundreds of people? I mean, aren't we helping Israel settle that score and get after a country that was harboring terrorists for years?
Look, if you want to believe the Secretary of State and what they've been saying, and even this recent resignation from the counterterrorism director of the White House, this is 100% as a result of Israel's advocacy and the advocacy of groups like AIPAC to bring us into a conflict in the Middle East that the American people never voted for. And again, those acts are horrific, Kyle. I mean, we don't want to see innocents being killed anywhere. I mean, when you see 173 schoolgirls in Iran killed by American Tomahawk missile, last time I checked, we're the only ones that make those missiles. It's a shame that we are diminishing our global standing. Right? To be said, if today we're deciding to go after a country because we don't agree with them, then when are we going into North Korea? When are we going into Sudan? Where does it stop? There seems to be no linear thinking here on this conflict.
Let me ask you this question. You're talking about some of the things that Trump has done. Mm-hmm. Is there any blame to go around to some of those uncommitted activists, some of those Democrats who, even after Kamala Harris became the nominee, wouldn't speak out on her behalf in the community? I mean, is there any blame there?
Here's what I'll say. I think an uncommitted movement was a very intentional tool used by activists to get the attention of the DNC. Up until the last day of that convention, asking for their values to be reflected in that platform, be it a speaker at the DNC, be it a public resolution by the DNC. And for me, I think it's a huge failure on the Democratic Party to have not acknowledged that large base of activist voters who are saying, hey, see the humanity of the innocents, see the struggling of the people who can't afford their health care, who seniors on Social Security that can't make ends meet. Here are values, and the values to me are basically focus on American priorities here, keep the money here, end the conflict, be a diplomatic superpower that we know America can be, right? And end the violence. And instead, they were shooed out, they were kicked out, they were told to wait their turn, and that's the consequence of politics. You have to court voters. I think it's a very lazy argument of any politician, to go out there and say, well, the voters should have voted for me, they should have known better. No, it's the politician should have made a better argument to vote for me.
So on a 1 to 10 scale, how have Democrats done courting those voters?
I think you're seeing more of a spectrum of opinion now. You're seeing Congressman Ro Khanna go out there and talk about it. You're seeing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You're seeing Elizabeth Warren, Chris Murphy. You're seeing more Democrats now than before, in my opinion, come out and be vocal on this conflict and to really recenter the argument on the economy in a way that they struggled in 24 and in a way that, think about this. If you're a Democrat, and I'm a Democratic voter, why you don't want to see Liz Cheney on the stage with Kamala Harris? Liz Cheney and I agree on nothing. Her father dragged us into a conflict for no reason, the Iraq conflict, which turned out to be the biggest lie sold to the American people. This is probably the second biggest lie, this Iran war, right? And so you don't want to see Liz Cheney on the stage with your presidential nominee if you're a true Democrat that wants to get out there and see the country move towards a direction that you believe in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about AIPAC. You had mentioned AIPAC just a second ago. For the listeners at home, that's a huge super PAC funded by primarily Jewish groups. How do you make the argument against AIPAC without it sounding anti-Semitic?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way I make an argument against the NRA. Right? I vehemently disagree with their policy choices, and I think they prioritize the wrong things. I think AIPAC's goal is to make sure there's unconditional, unwavering support for the nation of Israel, and I think if we are, again, in America, right, we are Americans, we ought to set our priorities as what furthers America's interests first, and how do we continue to make sure our citizenry, when we look at, let's just compare America to Israel. Let's go ahead and do that. In Israel, they have universal health care, they have child care, they have great public schools, and they have, a military that we help subsidize by and large. Here in America, what do we have? We have homeless people dying on the streets. We have veterans that can't get the health care they need. We have schools in Michigan that can't get kids to read proficiently by third grade. 70% of them can't read proficiently. And so you wonder, where are our priorities and why are these politicians who are in seats of power not listening to their residents, and why are they beholden to special interests? And to be clear, that's the last point. I would make the same argument for politicians who, again, overlook and refuse to do things to benefit the working class at the risk of upsetting corporate lobbyists, right? The same argument there applies, and it's about being consistent.
Representative, an abrupt shift of gears here. The luxury tax that Mr. Speaker Hall says, you said, wow, this is a great idea. You're going to vote. I
would give the Speaker, well, I got to see the math. But I would give the Speaker, a Republican Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, lots of credit for saying he wants to tax the wealthiest Michiganders. If that's truly what he wants to do, if he wants to tax Dick and Betsy DeVos on their luxury yacht they have, I will help him do that.
Are you a voice of one in the caucus?
I think you'll find that a lot of voters and a lot of people in my caucus and the chamber will support shifting the burden onto the wealthiest Michiganders if that's really what we're doing, and not doing the shell game where we're actually going to give these big guys a tax break at the cost of the working class. If he really wants to go out there and tax the wealthiest luxury goods, I think he'd find some consensus there.
Do you believe that's what he's doing? I mean, he had a press conference this week, and I asked him, I said, are you going to tax deliveries? And he's like, I don't know. And I asked him, there's a few other things. I think snow removal, he said he didn't know. Car washes, he said, I'm not going to tax car washes. Yeah. What do you think's going on here?
I mean, look, he's been a very transparent leader. I'm sure you guys in the media corps.
He hasn't released this plan. I hope you're joking. Are you joking?
I mean, he just won an award for transparency.
Supposedly,
so,
yes.
What I'll say is this. When he puts out this plan that we can all review and vet, I think that's when you can make a decision.
So you're suspect that there's a hidden agenda here.
I mean, I just got done telling you I had the President of the United States come to my district, hand us a letter, and backtrack on it. So I'm suspect that any politician that makes a promise and I don't see it come to fruition.
Is Lansing functional right now?
I think it's one of the most dysfunctional places in America.
Lansing, Michigan.
100%. I make no misrepresentations about that. Rewind a year ago. Well, I think right now, look at this last week we got done. I mean, you had an argument over a PA, right? Mm-hmm. And only one person in the town was arguing whose PA would be, to be fair.
Public act.
A public act over this interstate medical compact where you have 8,000 doctors at risk, right? You have a healthcare crisis. People in Michigan know their healthcare costs are going sky high. And here's something we can do to make sure that at least they'll have access to care. And we're running it right up until the deadline. We're getting as close to that iceberg as we can, right? And then we pull off a deal last minute, which I'm glad we did. But that's not certainty for the physician. I had physicians calling me saying, I might have to move my license to Ohio.
But Representative, wait a minute. Do you think the people at home who want these docs in their district give two hoots as to when you did it? The fact is you got it done is what's important.
We got it done. But the thing is, the physicians that are paying attention, they got emails from Laura saying, hey, come April 1st, you will not be able to practice in our state. They were worried about it. Again, I had physicians calling me saying, I'm going to have to move to Ohio. And these are high-performing specialty care doctors. We're talking about people who track illnesses at a high level. And they're thinking about moving to Ohio. to move their license there. That's ridiculous that they're even contemplating that. And this time, right? So we give certainty, Tim, I think, to people by doing it early and getting ahead of it. And again, think about it. If you're paying attention, you're disappointed that it took us this long. And if you're not paying attention, you're glad we did it, sure.
But Representative, to Zoe's point, though, why is Lansing dysfunctional?
Yeah.
Why is it the most dysfunctional place in America?
Yeah, I think right now there's a clear misalignment that's existing. You know, in the House, right? We're focusing on property taxes. We're focusing on a lot of good issues, and I give the Speaker credit for trying to tackle them. I would much rather see us do more bipartisan packages on healthcare affordability, on the cost of living, right? We look at these PBMs that have gone out of control, these pharmacy benefit managers. They've gone way out of control. They've ballooned the costs of prescription drugs in our state. We should be tackling them. I think we should be talking about underground infrastructure. We're not talking about that.
So you don't think you can get a bipartisan deal on property tax relief?
I think it depends how you do it, Tim. If it's going to shift the burden onto working families to give these mega homeowners, these McMansion homeowners a break, I'm not going to go for that. Any deal that's going to disadvantage our working families in our state will not have support.
So there needs to be a means test in this package to keep you happy?
There has to be a real way to pay for this package. Like we have to make sure we're not going to go into the coffers, ask working families to pay even more than they already now in one way or the other, whether it's increasing the sales tax without making sure we're targeting these luxury goods. We want to make sure if we're going to give relief to our working families, we're doing it in a way where it's affordable, sustainable, and that we're not picking winning. If we're picking winners and losers, it's the working families that are the winners in this equation.
Are you making a pitch here that you think Democrats can, lead this government in a more functional way? I mean, do you recall how the session you guys led ended? Or?
When we talk about the Democratic trifecta, we only like to focus on those last 40 days. But if you focus on the year and 9 months before it, it was one of the most productive in the state's history. We restored workers' rights. We passed transformative legislation around tax policy, the earned income tax credit, repealed the pension tax. I mean, Democrats deliver time and again when we're given the ability to govern. And I think, this time in the minority, sure, we're watching, a speaker here being able to keep his caucus together. I give him a lot of credit for doing that. But we also are planning when we're back in power, how do we target relief? How do we get to started on day one? How do we make sure that when we're in this position of trust again, we're able to execute a fair deal for the state of Michigan?
Get on your kicking shoe. Who's your candidate for governor?
You know what? It's still a primary. Last time I checked, and I'm going to watch it play out. I'm more interested.
How about Secretary of State?
I liked Garland Gilchrist a lot. I support him for governor. I think he'll be a good candidate for us in November. I think he'll be interesting to kind of see him kick off his campaign a little bit more.
Representative, did you have fun?
Oh, yeah. Are we doing overtime? We're not doing overtime?
You want to do a little overtime?
You want to do overtime?
Let's do some overtime.
Yeah.
Go to WKAR.org and come back for more of this, okay?
Yeah.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.